The Secret Valley is this next. So I'm on 105 of this book here. One morning, sometime later, I received a strange letter by post asking me to come to a certain address in Tucson, Arizona. It conveyed the idea that the information to be given was of such a nature as could only be explained in person. I considered the extraordinary way in which the request had reached me, and yet felt an inner desire to respond to the call. In a few days, I went to the address given, rang a bell, and in a moment the door was opened by a tall, slender gentleman, about 40 years of age, with iron gray hair and gray eyes, who stood perhaps 6 feet 1 inch in height. I introduced myself. He greeted me with a cordial, sincere handshake, which revealed unmistakably his was an absolute, true, and dependable nature. His eyes were steady and fearless. He gave one the impression that he possessed great reserve energy. I felt an unusual inner harmony about him and knew it could only mean the starting of a deep and wonderful relationship or friendship. He too seemed aware of an inner something that made each of us feel attracted to the other. He asked me to come in and be seated. You are here, he began, at my request, and I am deeply grateful, strange as it must have seemed to you. Your address was given to me by one of whom I shall speak later. In explanation, I have this to say, that I have made some very remarkable discoveries, which I must ask you to accept on faith until I can take you with me and prove their truth and reality to you. I was advised to get directly in touch with you personally as the only one to whom this should be revealed and with which I am concerned. For a starting point, I shall have to begin with things that occurred 20 years ago. At the time, I had a beautiful wife. Now I know she had great inner growth, of which, however, I was not aware. A son was born whom we both idolized. For 5 years, our happiness was complete. Suddenly, without any warning or apparent reason, the child disappeared. For many weeks we searched and did everything humanly possible to find him, but to no avail. Finally we gave up all hope. His mother never recovered from the shock, and 5 months later passed on. She had made a strange request during the last few days of her life that her body be held in a vault for 7 days after her passing, then cremated. It seemed rather particular to me, for at no time had we ever discussed anything in regards to this subject. However, I complied with her wishes. Imagine my surprise 5 days after her funeral when I received a call from a man in charge of this cemetery saying he had found the vault open that morning and the body gone. No clue to anything concerning the whole strange occurrence was ever discovered. 16 years later, I wakened one morning to find a letter upon the floor of my room addressed to me, but with no postmark. I picked it up, opened it, and read the contents, which left me mystified and incredulous, and I read, Your wife and son are living well and strong. Soon you will see them. Have patience until that time. Rejoice to know rejoice to know there is no death. At the appointed time, directions will reach you in this manner which you are now to follow implicitly. All depends upon your absolute silence. You shall see and receive full explanation of all that has seemed so mysterious. Then you will understand why truth is far stranger and more wonderful than fiction, for even the most extraordinary fiction is but a record of truth that is somewhere in the universe. Signed, a friend. My friend, you can imagine my astonishment. At first, I did not believe a word of it. The third evening after this, I was sitting in front of my great fire when I heard my beloved wife's voice as clear and as distinct as if she were in the room beside me saying, "Robert, my beloved, I am alive and well, and our son is with me. We will be so happy when you are with us again. Do not distrust the message. It is all true. You will be brought to us if you do not allow doubt to shut the door. I speak to you through the sound ray, which you will one day learn to use. I could stand the tension no longer and said, "Show yourself to me and I will believe." Instantly the voice replied, "Wait a minute." In about 3 minutes a brilliant ray of golden light came into the room, forming a tunnel, at the other end of which stood my beautiful wife. It was she unmistakably. "Beloved," she said, "seeming miracles have taken place in the midst of your life for years, but because your attention has not been called in the right direction, we had to wait until this time. Trust the messages that will come to you. Then you will come to us, and I assure you a new world will open. To our great love there is no barrier." Instantly the light ray vanished, and with it the voice. My joy knew no bounds. I could no longer doubt. I felt relaxation, peace, and rest I had not known for years. Then came weeks of waiting, which I now know was preparation going on within me. At last the message I longed for so much came, and with it a diagram and direction to be followed. I saw this would lead me into a higher mountain southeast of Tucson, Arizona. I made preparation to go at once, saying to my friends I was going to do a little prospecting. I took a horse and pack animal, finding very little discomfort and no difficulty in following the directions given. If I could have gone as a crow flies, I would easily have covered the distance in 2 days. Just before sundown on the third day, I came to a blind canyon and would have passed it unnoticed if it had not been for the diagram. I had just made camp. When it became dark, I rolled up in my blanket and soon dropped off to sleep, dreaming most vividly of waking in the morning and seeing a young man standing near by looking at me. When I did awaken, to my astonishment, there stood a young man in real life looking at me intently. He greeted me with a beautiful smile, saying, "My friend, you are expected to follow me." I noticed he had my things in readiness, and turning without further discussion, led the way towards the head of the canyon. After about an hour we came to the top because of the cliff that seemed to close the way before us. He turned, placed his hands upon a rock and pressed against it. A section of the wall, perhaps 10 feet by 12 feet, moved to the depths of about a foot, then slid to one side. We entered the tunnel that centuries ago must have been the bed of the underground watercourse. My companion closed the entrance behind us as we returned to go forwards. A soft, radiant light spread everywhere, so we could see quite clearly. I was astonished at all I saw, but I remembered the admonition I had received in my instructions to be silent. We continued in the tunnel for about an hour and finally came to a massive metal door. This opened slowly at my companion's touch. He stood aside and waited for me to pass through. I speeded out into the bright sunlight, almost breathless with delight at the beauty of the scene before me. Ahead of us lay a valley of surprising loveliness, about 100 acres in extent. "My friend," said the young man, "you have returned home after a long absence, all of which you shall soon understand." He then led the way to a beautiful building near the foot of a sheer cliff at the upper end of the valley. As we came near, I could see many kinds of fruit and vegetables growing in abundance, among them oranges, dates, English walnuts, and pecans. A beautiful waterfall poured over the cliff, making a limp pool at the base. The building was a massive one, and looked as though it had stood there for centuries. We had almost reached it when a beautiful woman in white appeared at the entrance. We came nearer, and my beloved wife stood before us, more beautiful than ever. In another instant I held her in my arms, and after all the agony I had been through in those years, it was almost more than I could stand. She turned, putting her arms around the young man who had brought me, and said, "Robert, this is your son." "Son," was all I could say, so nearly was I overcome by emotions. He stepped forward, put his arms both around us, and we three stood there for a moment in deep love and gratitude, happy once more. I suddenly realized it was 16 years since he had disappeared, and by now he must be 21. He answered my thoughts by saying, "Yes, Father, I am 21. Tomorrow is my birthday." "How can you read my thoughts so readily?" "Oh, that is very ordinary and easy thing for us. It is all natural when you understand how to do it, and really quite simple," he replied. "Come," he continued. "You must be hungry. Let us have something to eat." With their arms around me, we entered the ancient building. The interior was finished in pink marble and white onyx. I was shown to a beautiful room where the morning sun flooded everything with a glorious radiance. I refreshed myself and found a suit of white flannel had been provided for me. I tried it on, and it fitted perfectly. This surprised me, but again I remembered the admonition to be silent. I went downstairs and was presented to a striking-looking gentleman about my own height, with large, dark-piercing eyes. "Father," said my son, "this is beloved Master Uriel. He is the one who saved the lives of both mother and me, and has trained us all these years until you could be prepared to join us here. It was he who sent you the message and directions to come, because the time had arrived for your definite training to begin." We entered the dining room, which was magnificent, and I could not refrain from expressing my admiration. It had been placed at the southeast corner of the building on the main floor, and was flooded with sunlight morning and afternoon. The walls were made of heavy carved walnut, and the beam ceilings inlaid between the beams with motifs of hexagonal design. A solid piece of walnut at least 2 inches thick, resting on the ornate carved pedestal, served as a table and looked as if it were thousands of years old. We took our places around it, and presently a slender youth entered. My son introduced him by saying, "This is our brother Funway, whom our master brought from China when he was an infant, at the time of his life was about to be taken. He is from a very ancient Chinese family, and is able to do many wonderful things. He has always wished to serve us. We are privileged and happy to call him brother. He is one of the most joyous natures I have ever known." Among the things for breakfast were luscious strawberries and delicious dates and nut cakes. We went into a large living room, and Master Uriel said to me, "At the time your beloved wife, who is your twin ray, would have passed on, I saw an opportunity to give certain assistance, which would enable her to reach the ascended state, and thus have much greater freedom and wider capacity for service. It was my great privilege and joy to give that assistance. I opened the casket, restored her to conscious action, and enabled her to raise the body. I had already reached a point of high attunity, because her desire for the light was very great. It was her intense adoration to the longing for the light that made possible her ascension. I explained this to her the day you thought she had passed on. All three of you were children of mine and the embodiments of long ago. A great love was generated then, which has lasted through the centuries. Her deep love made possible the assistance and raising that has been accomplished at this time. Your son, who was stolen with the intention of being held for ransom, was brought to this canyon. The two concerned with the kidnapping began to quarrel, and one planned to take the child's life. I appeared before them and took him. They were paralyzed by their own fears, and neither ever recovered. Both passed on a few weeks later. If one deliberately takes the life of another human being, or determines mentally to take it, he has set a cause into motion that will surely take his own life. A feeling or desire for death or another person will do the same thing, for it goes forth to the person, and it begins to return the journey to the one who sent it. Many times individuals allow resentment against injustice to flash forth with an intense feeling to rid the world of this certain individual. This is a subtle form of the thought of death, and to the one who sends it out, it must return. Many people bring about their own disillusion by this very subtle activity of the human life, for no one ever escapes this immutable law. There are many phases of its reaction, and it is because humanity indulges in such thoughts and feelings that the race as a whole has been experiencing the dissolution of the body after body. The number of mankind that passed out through physical violence is infinitesimal compared to the death brought about by these subtle activities of thought, feeling, and spoken word. The human race has been killing itself for 1,000 years in the subtle ways because it will not learn the law of life and obey it. And that's where there's laws and people have to realize, but there's things there like MAD. If there's an accident, you join MAD and you just destroy everything. You just stay mad. Just looking at the time, about 11 minutes, and I think Instagram will shut off. There is only one law of life, and that is love. The self-conscious thinking individual who will not or does not obey the eternal beneficent decree cannot and will not retain the physical body, because all that is not love. Intentional or unintentional law acts regardless. Thoughts, feelings, words, and deeds are each but so much forces acting and internally move in an orbit of their own. If man knew he never ceases creating, even for an instant, he would realize through the process and presence of God within himself, he could purify his miscreation and thus be free from his own limitations. He spins a cocoon of human discord around himself and goes to sleep within it, forgetting at least for a time that if he can build it, he can also break through. By using the wings of his soul adoration and determination, he can break through his self-created darkness. Then he lives once more at the center of his being in the light and freedom of his God self. However, in the activity of you and your beloved family, or shall I say my beloved family, the cloud that has seemed to hold so much of sorrow is now turning inside out and reveals its glorious golden lining. You have now come within the radiant splendor of the living from which you will never again recede. In most cases, if human beings knew the wonderful things that are sometimes planned for them, they would unknowingly prevent the approach of the greater good. You have been invited here not only to join our loved ones, but to receive definite instructions concerning the existence use, and direction of the mighty God power latent within you. When you understand how to release and control it, anything will be possible for you. Your loved ones use the light and sound ray in communicating with you. This knowledge, with its power, will be explained, and you too shall be enabled to operate them consciously and at will. You feel deeply, and when that characteristic is consciously governed, there will come an awareness of the mighty God power that stands ready to be released at any instant. You are to remain here for 6 weeks of training and then return to the outer world to use the understandings you have received. Come again at any time, for you are now one of us. I can never put in words what those 6 weeks meant to me. To become aware of my own ability to use the instructions and application of such wisdom astonished me. Soon I began to gain confidence in myself that made everything much easier. What seemed so mysterious and unusual to the human, I found natural and normal to this stupendous inner presence. I had to realize that I was truly the Son of God, as the Son of the source of all good and limitless wisdom energy obeyed my conscious directions when I directed it, as does a master produce results instantly. As I gained confidence in my own ability to use the great law, the fulfillment naturally became more and more rapid. I marvel yet at the ever-pouring fountains of love and wisdom that stream forth from the great mystery. We love him with a deep devotion greater than any love that could ever exist between parent and child, for the love tie formed by the giving of spiritual understanding is eternal and far deeper than any love generated through human experience, no matter how beautiful and strong it may be. He often said to us, "If you will make yourself an eternal fountain of divine love, pouring it forth into every place your thought goes, you will become such a magnet for all good that you will have to call for help to dispense it. Peace and calmness of the soul release a power which compels obedience of the outer mind. This must be claimed with authority. Our home here in this secret valley has been used for over 4,000 years. One day, after giving a remarkable discourse on God's ownership, he looked at me very intently and suggested we take a walk. He led the way to the opposite side of the valley from which we had entered. Near the south wall and running parallel with it from the east to west was a ridge beginning at the ground, raising to about 7 feet in height, extending about 2,000 feet in length, and then descending to the ground again. As we came closer, what I saw was a vein of white quartz. The master Uriel stepped to where the vein came to the ground and kicked a piece loose with his foot. I saw it was immensely rich in gold. My human love for gold tempted to surge forth, but the inner presence instantly checked it, and with a smile the master remarked, "This is well done. Now I have work to do in Europe, and must leave you for the present." He smiled and was gone instantly. It was the first time I had shown the full dominion he possessed. It was the first time he had shown full dominion he possessed, and the things he was able to do in this manner. Immediately my son became visible in exactly the same spot where Uriel had been standing the instant before, laughed heartily at my surprise. "Mother and I," he said, "can take your body with us wherever we choose in the same way. Do not be surprised. It is the natural law, and only seems strange and unusual because you are not using it as yet. It really is no more extraordinary than the telephone would have been to the people in the Middle Ages if they had known the law of its construction, they could have used it then just as well as we of this century. Since that visit to my family in the secret valley, I have been there 7 times. The last time I returned to the outer world, the Master gave me your address, which accounts for my asking you to come here. He extended the invitation for you to return with me. My host suddenly realized he had been talking several hours and begged indulgence for taxing my patience. I told him the experiences were so fascinating, I had been so intensely interested, that time was non-existent so far as I was concerned. I accepted and was deeply grateful for the Master Uriel's invitation to visit them, and said so frankly. A moment later, a tall young man came into the room. "Let me present our brother, Funway," said my host, introducing him, and in a most perfect English he replied, "My brother with a heart of light has journeyed far. My heart leaps in ecstasy and joy. My soul feels your serenity and radiance." Addressing my host directly, he continued, "Knowing you are busy, I am here to serve you." "It will give us great pleasure to have you break bread with us," said my friend, turning to me, and together we passed into the dining room. Our dinner was delicious, and when finished, my host again resumed his conversation, ever relating many of his personal experiences with Uriel. They were remarkable. Indeed, that is speaking from the human side of our conscious only, but from the standpoint of our divinity, all was and is supremely natural. Suddenly, a ray of light, or rather a tube of light, came into the room, and from the conversation I knew it was my host, Twin Ray, speaking. In the moment the ray was directed at me, and he said, "Beloved, allow me to present the brother whom our Master Uriel has requested to meet." I saw his twin ray, and I heard her as clearly as if she stood in a room beside us. This way of communicating is a wonderful, happy experience. It is possible to so condense light as to form a tube in which sound and visions can be conveyed. It was as real as a searchlight. My host insisted that I make his home mine until the day of our departure into the mountains. We started before daylight, the 7th day after our meeting. It was one of the most memorable experiences of my life up to that time. All he had told me proved to be true in the minute details. Our arrival at the secret valley was a most joyous event. Our happiness was very great. I met my host, Twin Flame, and their son, and was then shown over the ancient buildings where so many students had received true understandings of the law of being and attained their eternal freedoms. It was a marvelous sensation to stand where the great God power had been focused for so many centuries. The Ascended Masters had made a retreat for some of their work. I sat contemplating the blessings the student had received who were privileged to come later when the Master Uriel addressed me. "My son," he began, "you are nearing wonderful liberation. Hold close to the continuous acceptance of your own indwelling Master presence, and you will have just cause for great rejoicing." He extended his right hand, and the veil between the visible and invisible was drawn aside. "I want you to see," he continued, "as we who have ascended, the sublime and majestic activity of our world. Here we continually bear witness as sons of God, because there is no longer doubt, fear, or imperfection within us. I shall always remember the joy and privilege that was mine during the days I spent with those wonderful people. Every day," said Uriel, "you shall witness the use of light and sound rays that annihilate time and space, and which mankind is destined to use in the near future as naturally as they now use telephones. This is one of the most stupendous activities the individual may learn how to direct. A light ray can be drawn and controlled so it may be used as a pencil to write upon metal or in the sky, and the writing remains visible as long as the one directing desires. When the student is strong enough to stand against the opinions of the world of ignorance, then he or she is ready to bear witness to the marvels of the individual activities of God's manifested by the Ascended Masters. And this is where everybody that's going to be fourth and fifth dimension, you have to be able to do this. No matter what anybody says, thinks, or believes, you have to stand in your light and truth. And this is said very, very clearly. This is where I don't give a shit what anybody says about me or thinks. This is where I spent my whole life standing up to people insulting me, calling me names, mocking me, doing all kinds of things, and I survived it all. It says, when the student is strong enough to stand against the opinions of the world of ignorance, then he or she is ready to bear witness to the marvels of the individual activities of God manifested by the Ascended Masters, and they will teach you to become that. But if you're like, oh, poor me, oh, I'm an empath, and all this bullshit, no, you're not going to make it. If you don't decide to really make change and do right. And that's where there's a really, really fine line. And you can't play. Like I say, you only borrow gifts and abilities for a period of time, then you return them. And people want all gifts and abilities, but not to do anything good. They just want to show off. It's not about that. And this whole world is going to hate you. If you really become Jesus, Buddha, or you become a master, anything, everyone's going to hate you. Everyone is going to try to bring you down, make you feel like shit, or whatever it is. I told Cindy when she first came into my life, I says, you're going to have an elephant skin. Everybody has to have an elephant skin because people will say and do all kinds of shitty things. And if you want to sit there and boo-hoo-hoo and cry and oh, poor me, and want to be pet like a cat or treated like, you're an invalid or you can't think or take care of yourself, you ain't going to make it. You can't be codependent on nothing. There's only one source, one truth, and it's the light that's inside. And your fiduciary, your God self, your higher self, you can't fool it. You can't play games and bullshit. So again, when a student is strong enough to stand against the opinions of the world of ignorance, then he or she is ready to bear witness to the marvels of the individual activities of God manifested by the Ascended Masters. Because they will make you that. And you have to believe in it. If you don't believe in it, you can't become it. And this is where there's lots of things and people don't want to accept and know that. Like I said, I believe in everything. I always have since I was a little child. My granddad taught me many things. Until he can do this, the power in suggestion and the radiation of doubt from others will disturb him intermittently to such an extent that he many times gives up the quest for truth. Interruption to the steady flow of instruction is discord. Discord is the wedge and subtle way by which the sinister force on this earth enters the outer activity of a student who has determined to face the light. Such activity is very subtle because it is a feeling and it creeps in upon one before he is really aware of its existence. It is persistent beyond belief, and the growth is so insidious that one does not realize what has been done until the momentum is already underway. This feeling begins as a slight doubt, A doubt needs only to be felt 2 or 3 times until it becomes distress. Distress whirls a time or two in the emotional body and becomes suspicious, and suspicious is self-destruction. Remember this, my son, as you return again to the outer world, that you will find it and safeguard that will carry you through every experience in life, keeping you untouched by discord. If one sends out suspicion, he will be suspected, for everyone has in his world just exactly that which he puts into it, and this eternal, irrevocable decree exists throughout the universe. All impulses of conscious travel back to the central point that sent them out. Not even an atom escapes. The real students of light face the light, send it before him to see it unfolding radiance everywhere he moves, adores it, he adores it constantly. From the doubts, suspicion, and ignorance of a human mind, he turns away and knows only the light. This is his source, his true self. With these parting words, Uriel bade me farewell. I returned to my daily routine in my outer life. And this is where I keep saying you have to find the light. You have to look for the light. You got to stop looking for the dark. You got to stop chasing things. You got to stop all kinds of stuff. You got to own it. There's a light in everybody. And it's yours to figure out. And all the books I've read, all these things I've shared, all the things I've channeled for over 3 years. And there are people that came on 3 years ago that still haven't figured any of it out. They're still in their ego. They're still in their power. They're still praying to their gods. They're still trying to manifest lots of money and all kinds of things. They're not just trusting the universe. They're not taking this knowledge inside. They're not listening. They're not working. They're not doing anything. And they're just going through their stuff. And prayer is really important. Praying out loud is important. See, Mandy says there it's 800 days since she started following me. And that's, that's over 2 years. There's 365 days in a year. So that tells you she's been there. And she even did prayers when I sent her smudge. And it brought all kinds of changes. And when you experience these things, why don't you keep doing it? It's like when you meditate, ask to sit in the light. 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes in the afternoon, 5 minutes in the evening. And see there, she's saying she learned so much and she's a completely different person today than who she used to be. I know lots of people that came on and are still there and nothing has changed in their lives. They're just spinning around. It's like you go to one of those race car tracks where it's just a big oval and they go around and around and around. And I don't know why anybody likes that. If somebody brought me to one and I told them, next time you intend to go to one of these, do not ever ask me. I found it boring. I didn't like smelling gas fumes. Because all they're doing, he just waited. All he wanted to see was a crash and people get hurt. And I'm like, I'm not interested in that crap. Hey, Danny Spoon's been a while. I'm reading Unveiled Mysteries. And I read a really, really good part there. And I'll read this one little part that I just read. This is when the student is understanding light. It says, when the student is strong enough to stand against the opinions of the world of ignorance, then he or she is ready to bear witness to the marvels of the individual activities of God manifested by the Ascended Masters. So God's omnipresent power. The following day I received the communications through which I became engaged in a business activity that required all my time and attention. The mere anticipation of it gave me great joy, and I entered into much enthusiasm. There came a refreshing, quickening sense, a thing I had never before known in my business experience. In the course of its progress, I came into close personal contact with a man very dominating character. His entire attitude in business was to gain his desire by force, if intrigue failed, or he was opposed in any way. He believed only in the power of his own intellect and human will, and had neither knowledge of nor faith in anything else. At no time did he hesitate to crush or ruin persons or things that stood in the way of his success, and used all means to gain his own selfish ends. I had met him some 3 years before the following experience took place, and at the time had felt almost helpless in the presence. So overpowering was his feeling of domination he continually sent out. Yet I knew in spite of my own reaction to him that his control over others was only force-focused into the outer activity. I was somewhat disturbed as I realized I would have to associate with him. Immediately I sought a way to deal with him by application of the God law, when the inner voice said to me clearly, "Why not let the mighty God within take full charge and handle this condition? The inner power knows no domination and is always invincible." I was merely grateful and completely released everything into its management. I met this man with 2 others and agreed to go with them to inspect a mining property in a distant state. I felt to be a valuable one. The owner was an elderly woman whose good husband had passed on by an accident in the mine some months before. He had left things in precarious conditions, and our dominating friend had determined to buy the mine at his own price, not an honest one. After a long trip by auto, we reached our destination about 2 o'clock the second day. We met the owner, whom I realized was a blessed soul, true and honorable. Then and there I took the determined stand that she should have a square deal and receive full value for the property. She invited us to the lovely luncheon. As we proceeded to examine the mine, we went through the workings, tunnels, drifts, shafts, and stoopings. The more I watched, the more certain I became something was wrong. The very atmosphere seemed to breathe into me. I was certain a rich strike had been made, which had not been reported to the owner. I somehow knew the buyer had secretly placed one of the workmen on duty to watch for such an activity, that during the week of watching, he had gained the confidence of the superintendent. I realized at the heart he was a good man, but not awakened spiritually speaking. As we stood talking to him, my God self disclosed fully what had occurred a short time previously. As 2 were on their inspection of the work, they had come to a spot where the shots had broken into the face of a tunnel leading directly into the heart of the mountain. The blast had broken into a very rich vein of gold bearing quartz. The superintendent was about to rush out, reported to the owner, when the spying workman remarked, "Wait, I know the man who is going to buy this mine. If you want to continue your present position, don't mention the strike. I'll see to it that you not only stay here as superintendent, but there'll be 5,000 in it for you. The old lady'll get to keep her The old lady will get to keep the old lady will get enough to keep her anyways, and the superintendent, fearing the loss of his position, had agreed. In our examination of the mine, we came to an end of the main tunnel. I felt strongly this was the place. Rich strike had been made. It had been cleverly covered up and disguised as loose formations where it was dangerous to work. Such was the report they had made to the woman who owned the mine. As I stood at the place, talking with the others, my inner sight was open. I saw all that had taken place, the rich strike, the covering of it, the offer to the superintendent, and his acceptance. I was grateful to have my feeling verified, but knew I must wait. We returned to the owner's residence and negotiations began. The buyer opened the subject by saying, "Mrs. Atherton, what do you expect for this property?" "I am holding in my hand $250,000, "I am holding it at $250,000, she replied courteously and gently. "Absurd," he shouted. "Preposterous, ridiculous. It is not worth half that amount." He carried on in this vein for some few moments, blustering as was his habit. It had worked many times before, and he was still following the old line of procedure. He argued and stormed and ended by saying, "Mrs. Atherton, you are in a position where you must sell. I will be generous and give you $150,000. "I will consider it," she replied, so cowed by his attitude of domination and blusters that she began to accept his idea and give in to his arrogant impudence. I saw her waver and immediately began the high pressure, the whole situation. "I cannot wait," he went on. "My time is valuable. You must decide at once, or the deal is off." He drew the papers from his pocket and placed them on the table. Mrs. Atherton looked about helplessly, and I shook my head no to her, but she did not see me. The contract lay open, and she stepped across the room, taking a chair at the table, preparing to sign. I knew if she were to be protected, I must at once, and going to where she sat, I addressed our dominating friend. "Just a moment, my good man," I said. "You will pay this dear lady what her mine is worth, and you are not going to get it." He turned his wrath upon me with several very pungent invectives and attempted the same tactics as usual. "I'd like to know who is going to prevent me having the mine at my price," he retorted. I felt the surge of the mighty God power within me come forth like an avalanche, keeping me unaffected by his triad of vindictiveness, and I replied, "God will prevent you." With that answer, he burst out laughing. He carried on blusterously, cynically, insulting. I waited calmly. "You fool," he began again in another triad of anger. "Your prat about God. Not you nor God nor anything can stop me. I get what I go after, and I get it regardless. No one has ever stopped me yet." His ignorance seemed to have no limit, and he revealed in himself mind and body, but the victim of his emotions. His reason was unable to function, as is always the case under the uncontrolled feelings, or it would have warned him to go no further with his insults. I felt the expansion of God's power again. This time it came stronger and stronger until in the tone like a clarion, a mighty inner voice of my God self revealed the truth of the whole transaction and the deception at the mine. "Miss Atherton," I said, "there has been gross deceit practiced upon you. Your workmen made a rich strike. This man had a spy among them who has bribed your superintendent to remain silent concerning it." The superintendent and the others in the room went white and speechless as my inner self continued to expose their treachery. The prospective buyer seemed equal to any emergency, and interrupting me in his wild anger shouted, You lie. I'll brain you for such interference. He lifted his steel cane, and as I raised my hand to seize it, it was a white flame suddenly shot forth, flashing full in his face. He dropped to the floor as if struck by lightning. Then my mighty God self spoke again with all authority of eternity, majestic and powerful. Let no one in this room move until given permission. My outer self, no longer me, but God in action, stepped to where the man lay and went on. Great soul in this man, I speak to you. Too long have you been held prisoner by his dominating personal self. Come forth now. Take command of his mind and body. Right the many deceptions he has practiced in the present life. Within the hour, this strong outer human creation of discord and injustice, which he has built up, shall be consumed, and never again shall it deceive or humanly dominate another of God's children. To the outer self, I was awakened, and in peace, love and kindness, generosity, and goodwill to all that lives. Slowly the color began to come back into the man's face, and he opened his eyes in strange bewilderment. God in me, still in charge, took him gently by the hand, and putting an arm under his shoulder, helped him to a large easy chair again. It commanded, "My brother, look at me." As he raised his eyes to mine, a tremor passed over his body, and in a voice scarcely audible said, "Yes, I have seen. I understand how wrong I have been. God forgive me." He dropped his head in his hands and hid his face, silent and ashamed. Tears began to drop through his fingers, and he wept like a child. "You will pay this dear lady $1,000,000, my God self continued. Give her 10% interest in the mine besides, for in the strike recently made is at least 10 million in gold ore." With deep humility and strange sweetness, he answered, "Let it be done now." He requested his men, this time, instead of ordering them, as was his former habit, to draw up the papers as had been directed. Mrs. Atherton and he both signed, completing the transaction. I turned to the others in the room, realizing from the expressions on their face, all of them had been so lifted in consciousness they had seen beyond the human veil, each of them saying, "Never, so help me God, will I ever attempt to deceive or do wrong to my fellow man again." They had been raised to fully recognize and accept the God self within every one of them. It was late afternoon when the occurrence took place. Mrs. Atherton extended a cordial invitation to remain as her guests overnight and accompany her to Phoenix in the morning for the recording of the paper for the sale. After dinner that night, we gathered in the big living room before the large open fire. Everyone sincerely sought more understanding of the great cosmic law of life. They asked how it happened, and I had come into this kind of knowledge, and I told them of the Master Saint Germain and the way I had met him. I related some of my experiences on Mount Shasta, and how in the course of our conversation in regard to the great cosmic law, he said, "My son, the great cosmic law does not discriminate any more than does the multiplication table. If one makes a mistake in its application, or electricity, when one who is ignorant of the law governing its use tries to direct its force without knowledge of the way to control it, the great immutable decree which forever keeps order in the infinite realm of manifestation life are all based upon the one great principle of creation, love, that is the heart of the source of all and very hub upon which existence in form takes place. Love is harmony, and without it in the beginning of a form, that form could not come into existence at all. Love is the cohesive power of the universe. Without it, a universe could not be. In your scientific world, love expresses itself as an attractive force between the electrons. It is the directive intelligence which wills them into form, and the power which keeps them whirling around the central core, and the breath within the core that draws them to it. The same thing is true of each vortex of force everywhere in creation. A central core and electron whirling around it form an atom. This core of love is to the atom what the magnetic pole is to the earth, and what the spine is in the human body. Without central core, the heart center, there is only the uniformed universal light, the electrons filling in infinity and whirling around the great central sun. The electron is pure spirit or light of God. It remains forever uncontaminated and perfect. It is eternally self-sustained, indestructible, self-illuminous, and intelligent. If it were not, it could not and would not obey the law and direction activity of love. It is immortal, ever pure, intelligent, light energy, and the only real true substance out of which everything in the universe is made, the eternal, perfect life essence of God. Interstellar space is filled with this pure light essence. It is not dark and chaos, as has been ignorant, limited concepts of puny human intellects. This great sea of universal light that exists everywhere throughout infinity is constantly being drawn into form, given a quality of one kind or another, according to the way of the electrons, are held around the central point or core by love. The number of electrons which combine with each other is a specific atom, is the result of a determined by conscious thought. The rate at which they whirl around the central core is the result of that determination by feeling. The intensity of the drawing and whirling motion within the center core is the breath of God, and therefore the most concentrated activity of divine love. Speaking in scientific terms, it would be called centripetal force. These are the determining factors which make the quality of an atom. Thus you will see the atom in an entity, a living, breathing thing created or brought into existence by the breath and love of God through the will of self-conscious intelligence. In this way, the Word is made flesh, the machinery that self-conscious intelligence uses to accomplish this manifestation of its being is thought and feeling. Destructive thoughts and discord feelings is rearranged the ratio and rate of speed of the electron within the atom, that the duration of the breath of God within the pole is changed. The duration of the breath is decreed by the will of the consciousness using that particular kind of atom. If that consciousness directing will is withdrawn, the electron loses their polarity, and flying apart, seeking their way back intelligently, mind you, to the great central sun, repolarizing themselves. There they receive love only. The breath of God is never ending, and orders the first law is eternally maintained. Some scientists have claimed and taught that planets collide in space. No such thing is possible. To do so would be to throw the entire schism of creation into chaos. It really is fortunate indeed that the mighty law of God are not limited to the opinions of some of the children of earth. It does not matter what any scientists, mundane or otherwise, think God's creation is ever moving forwards and expressing more and more perfection. The constructive thought and harmonious feelings within the human mind and body are the activities of love and order. These permit the perfect ratio and speed of the electron within the atom to remain permanent, and thus they stay polarized to their particular point in the universe as long as the duration of the breath of God within their core is held steadily by the will of the directing self-conscious intelligence using the body in which they exist. In this way, the quality of perfection and its manifest maintenance of life in the human body is always under the conscious control of the will of the individual occupying it. The will of the individual is supreme over the temple, and even in the case of accident, no one leaves his body temple until he wills to do so. Very often, pain in the body, fear, uncertainty, and many other things influence a personality to change its decision concerning what it has willed in the past. But everything that happens to the body is and will always be under the control of the individual's free will. To understand the above explanation concerning the electrons and the conscious control the individual has through his thought and the feelings to govern the atomic structure of his own body is to understand the one principle governing form throughout infinity. When man will make the effort to pour this to himself or within his own atomic flesh body, he will then proceed to master himself. When he has done that, all else in the universe is his willing co-worker to accomplish whatever he wills through love. Whoever makes himself willingly obedient unto the law of love has perfection in his mind and world permanently maintained. Unto him and him alone does all authority and mastery belong. He only has a right to rule because he has first learned to obey. When he has obtained obedience from the atomic structure within his own mind and body, all atomic structures outside of his mind and body will obey him also. Thus, mankind, through thought and feeling, has the power, each individual within himself, to raise to a higher or sink to the lowest. Each one alone determines his own pathway of experience. By conscious control of his attention as to what he allows his mind to accept, he can walk and talk with God face to face or looking away from God, become lower than an animal, sinking his human consciousness into oblivion. In the latter case, the God flame within him then withdraws from his human habitation. After eons of time, it tries a human journey once again into a world of psychic matter until final victory is accomplished consciously and of its own free will. And that's where God always wins. Dark never wins. I told them of the limitless possibilities which Saint Germain had shown me were before mankind for accomplishment, whenever they are willing to accept the great God presence within every individual as directing and accomplishing power. The buyer of the mind asked me why I use the word acceptance so often, and I recall the words of Saint Germain had used in explaining it to me, for he said, even in the outer activity of your life, if you purchase a thing or are offered something marvelous and perfect, if you do not accept it, it would be impossible for you to use or have the benefit from it. So it is with the great God presence within us. Unless we accept that our life is God's life and that all power and energy we have with which to do anything is God's power, God's energy, how can we have God qualities and accomplishments in our world? As sons of God, we are commanded to choose whom we shall serve, the mighty presence of the God within us or the outer human self. The gratification of the outer human appetite, the sense demands, has one and only one result: misery, degradation, and destruction. All constructive desires is really the God self within pushing perfection forwards into the use and enjoyment of the outer self. The great energy of life is flowing through us constantly. If we direct it to constructive accomplishment, it brings joy and happiness. If directed to sense gratification, there can be anything but misery as a result, because it is all the action of law and impersonal life energy. Keep before the outer activity of your mind the constant reminder that you are life, God in action, in you and your world. The personal self is continually claiming things and power of its own when the very energy by which it exists is loaned to it by the God self. The outer personal human activity does not even own its skin. The very atoms of its body are loaned to it by the Supreme Presence, the God Presence from the great sea of universal substance. Train yourself to return all power and authority to the great glorious God flame, which is your real self and the source from which you have always received every good thing. We talked until 2 o'clock in the morning, and then I had to suggest we retire. No one wanted to sleep, but I said to them, "You will sleep in the arms of God," and then next morning they were surprised to realize how quickly they had dropped off to sleep. We were up at 7 and on our way to Phoenix. The recording was completed, and I explained I must leave as my work with them was finished for the time being. They were all deeply gratified and anxious to know more. I promised to keep in touch with them and give further help as Saint Germain should direct. As I was leaving, the buyers of the mine turned to me and said, "I don't care what anybody thinks of me. I want to embrace you and thank you from the bottom of my heart for saving me from the ruin of my outer self and for revealing the great light." I bowed my head in deep humility and replied, "Thank God I am but a channel. God alone is the great presence and the power that does all things well." Mrs. Atherton turned to me and expressed her feeling, and this is where I talk about a hollow bone. It's all through the Creator. Anybody that channels or does anything is from the universe. Mrs. Atherton said, I do praise and thank God in you for the mighty protecting presence, and never in my life shall I cease to thank God and you for the light this experience has brought to us all. I feel certain we shall all meet again, I replied, and bidding everyone goodbye, turned my face once more to Mount Shasta, arriving at my lodge that evening of the second day. 2 weeks later, I felt a strong impulse to make one more trip to my trysting place with Saint Germain. I started at 4 in the morning and reached the edge of the dense timber about 9. The plaintive cry of my panther friend came to my ears before I had gone 20 paces into the woods. I answered quietly. In the moment he came bounding to my side with all the welcome of an old-time friend, and we proceeded onwards to our meeting place. I noticed the panther was very restless and acted as if laboring under some inner agitation. This was the most unusual, for he had always been quiet. When in my presence, I patted and stroked the beautiful head, but it made no difference. I sat down and we ate lunch. "Come on, my boy," I said as we finished. "Let's go for a walk." He gave me a long, steady look, the most pathetic expression I had ever seen. I could not understand it. We had gone some distance when he came to a cliff, about 15 feet high, at the top of which hung a projecting rock. Something caused me to look at the panther. The expression in his eyes was wild and fierce. I sensed a source of tension in the atmosphere, but did not realize what it was. I walked on a few paces further and felt a chill pass over me. Looking up suddenly, I saw a mountain lion crouching ready to spring. The next instant, it leaped towards me. I threw myself against the cliff, and the lion landed beyond where I had stood. Like a flash of lightning, the panther sprang, and the two locked in mortal combat. No words can describe the terror of the struggle that followed. They screamed, rolled, tore, clawed each other. The lion was considerably heavier, and it seemed, for a time, as it would gain the advantage. However, the panther was the faster moving of the two, and finally broke away. There was just an instant pause until it saw a chance. Then, with one spring, landed on the lion's back, fastened its teeth just behind the ears. The panther's grip was like steel, and after a few seconds of rolling and twisting, the lion's struggles grew weaker. Finally, they ceased altogether. The panther came reeling towards me, his side terribly torn. He looked up at me, all the fierce gone from his eyes, his energy ebbing fast. There passed an expression of contentment over his face, and suddenly giving a plaintive cry, he fell over dead at my feet. I stood motionless and wept silently at the loss of my friend, for I had become almost as attached to him as to the human companion. The next instant I looked up, and beside me stood Saint Germain. "My beloved brother, be not sad or dismayed," he said. "Your contact with the panther had so quickened its consciousness that it could no longer remain in the present body. The great cosmic law demanded from it some service to you. This it gave in love by saving your life. All is truly well." He touched the thumb of his right hand to my forehead. "Be at peace," he continued, as the feeling of grief left me, and I felt completely relieved. "The great cosmic law is unerring. We cannot receive without giving, and we cannot give without receiving. Thus the great balance of life is maintained. I congratulate you sincerely on the service rendered at the mine, and your sincerity during the occurrence. All concerned with the transitions will become greater helpers to humanity. Soon you will be called upon to render a far greater service than you have given so far. In it, remember always, it is God's power and intelligence acting, and your mind, body, only the channel. Until you meet with this experience, meditate constantly upon the limitless power of God, which can express through you at any time." I asked him what the Ascended Master's attitude is in regard to the many channels through whom partial truth is given forth, and he replied, "There are many sincere channelers. Some have more understanding than others. All are God's children, serving the best of their abilities with understandings they have at present. We may not judge anyone, but we must know and see only God expressing in all. Our endeavor is to bless all activities wherever it is. We see the inner light radiating through such activities. This makes it possible for us to be mistaken as to whether they are or are not giving from truth. It is the same with individuals. Those who offer their services in the name of the ascended Jesus Christ will always receive more than ordinary sustaining power. We had walked some distance when he said, "Come, I will accompany you home. Place your arm about my shoulders." I did so and felt my body lift from the ground. In a few moments I was in my room at the lodge, with Saint Germain standing beside me, smiling at my surprise. "Meet me in 7 days," he said, "at our appointed place, for then we will finish our work in this part of the country." He smiled, bowed graciously, slowly faded from sight. The last thing that remained visible as he gradually disappeared were his marvelous, beautiful eyes smiling back at me. As I meditated each day upon the great God presence within for my coming service, I realized more and more how important it is to keep the attention focused upon the presence only, no matter what appearance seems to indicate, in order to keep any outer conditions from affecting me. In one of Saint Germain's conversations, he had stressed particularly the all importance of keeping my outer self harmonious, and in regards to this he had said, "My son, you cannot realize how great is the necessity for harmony in the outer self, if the fullness of the inner perfection and power is to be expressed in your outer life. The importance of keeping a feeling of peace, love, serenity in the personal self cannot be emphasized too strongly, for when this is done, the mighty God presence within can act without limit in an instant. The continual outpouring of feelings of peace and divine love to every person and everything unconditionally, no matter whether you think it be deserved or not, is the magic key that unlocks the door and releases instantly this tremendous inner God power. Fortunate indeed is he who has learned this law, for he then seeks to be all peace and love. Without it, humanity has nothing good, and with it, they have all things perfect. Harmony is the keynote and the great law of life. Upon it rests all perfect manifestations. Without it, all forms disintegrate, return into the great sea of universal light. The following 7 days I spent much time in meditation. I felt greater and greater peace growing within me until the sixth day. It seemed as if my entire conscious were like a great calm sea. On the morning of the seventh day, I left my lodge at 4 and reached our meeting place at 10:30. I sat down on a log to wait with the feelings of wonderful exhilaration which I knew to be the result of my meditation. I was so deep within contemplation of my God self I did not hear anyone approaching until a voice spoke to me. I looked up and I saw an old man with white hair and beard, whom I thought at first sight was an old prospector, although his clothing was too clean for that occupation. As he came up to me and held out his hand, that to confirm my feeling he was not a laboring man. We exchanged greetings, chatted for a few moments on generalities. Then he turned to me and said, "My friend, I would like to tell you a story. It won't take long. I haven't told it to anyone for a long time. I would like to try once more." By the time I began to have a feeling of intense interest, it occurred to me that he might be thirsty. As I reached for the cup to give him a drink from the spring by which we stood, a crystal cup formed within my hand, like the one Saint Germain had held out to me several times. The old man looked up and with eyes shining and excitement almost shouted, "Is it he? Is it he?" I did not know what to do, so I insisted he drink. As I looked within the cup, I saw it was filled with the same clear sparkling liquid the master had given me. The old man grasped it eagerly and with an intense expression of the deepest gratitude I have ever seen drank the contents. He immediately became very calm and quiet, but with all a deep intense sincerity. I asked him again to tell me the story, and he began saying, "My father was a British officer stationed in the Punjab of India, where we made our home. When I was 16, he financed a friend who went to South Africa to try his luck in the diamond mine, but my father never heard from him afterwards. The year I was 20, a tall, handsome stranger, a man of great wisdom, visited my father at our home. He had come to bring a message from father's friend. "I bring you news," he explained, "from the friend whom you financed 4 years ago. He met with great success on the ventures, in fact, became very wealthy. He has recently passed on at the mines and left no relatives. His entire fortune has been left to you, and in case of your passing, it is to go to your son, if you desire. I will take charge of the matter and have it transferred at once." "I cannot leave India at the present time," my father replied, "for I am on government duty here. I appreciate greatly your offer to take care of the matter for me." I was standing nearby during their conversation, and when they had completed agreements, the stranger turned to me. "My son," he said, "when you find the man who will offer you a crystal cup of the sparkling liquid, you will have met the one who can assist you in raising the body. I cannot tell you more than this, except that you will find him on a great mountain in North America. This may seem vague to you now, but it is all I can say. The stranger left, and months later my father, who had ridden out to adjust certain government matters with the natives, was shot and passed on before he could be brought home. I was an only son, and after another month, mother and I prepared for our return to England. Just before we left, the same stranger came again, and he said, was ready to transfer father's fortune to me. I explained father had been shot. Yes, the stranger replied. When I left 2 months ago, I knew your father would pass on before my return. I have arranged for the fortune to be transferred to you, or rather the Bank of England for you. Here's the money you may wish to use on your journey home, also the papers of transfer and the credentials you will need at the bank. Present them and you will receive custody of your wealth. Much of it is in diamonds of the finest quality. I thanked him and offered to pay for his service and kindness, but he replied, your kind intent is greatly appreciated, but that is already adjusted. I will be happy to accompany you to the steamer at Bombay. The trip revealed to me his great wisdom, and beside him I felt like an infant. I know now he enveloped me in the radiation which has stayed with me throughout the years. He arranged for transportation, accompanied us to the boat, and his last words to me were, remember the crystal cup. Seek and you shall find. After a most wonderful voyage, we arrived in Southampton, went on to London, and presented my credentials to the Bank of England. The official to whom I presented them remarked, yes, we were expecting you today. Here are your bank and checking books. I looked at them and saw how much my fortune amounted to, and was amazed to learn £100,000 had been placed to my credit. 5 years later, my mother passed on. I transferred half of my wealth to the bank in New York and began to search for the man with the crystal cup. I can never repeat the disappointments, the trials, the sorrows I have been through, but in the face of everything, somehow I could never give up. The thing which seems so strange to me is while I have grown old in the outer appearance, my energy and strength are as great as ever. Sometimes I think greater than in my fullest youth. In years, I am 70 today. I just want to follow the trail, and praise God I have found you. My desire was so great, it was almost irresistible. But my good man, I asked, what am I to do for you? You will know, he replied, for I know I have made no mistakes. In the heart of this majestic mountain is a great power. I feel it. Ask God to show you what to do. Suddenly I felt the mighty God power surging forth, so strong it almost lifted me from the ground. Making the sign Saint Germain had taught me, I called for the God light, and raised my hand in salutation and said, mighty God in man and the universe, we seek thy light, we seek thy wisdom, we seek thy power. Let thy will be done in and for this, my brother who has sought and found me, to do for him I know not what. Thou knowest, manifest thy will through my mind and body, and let whatever is to be done for this brother and thy son come forth. As my hand came down, it held the crystal cup filled with living liquid light. I offered it to him, and my mighty God self spoke again. Drink without fear, thy search is ended. He drank, and the contents without a moment's hesitation. I stepped forwards quickly and took both his hands in mine. Slowly and steadily every vestige of age disappeared from him, and the God in me continued, behold, thou art forever free from all earthly limitations. Ascend now unto the ascended hosts of light who wait thee. Very slowly he began to raise from the ground. As he did so, his human garments disappeared. He became clothed in remnants of glistening white. I let go of his hand. Then, a voice of the deepest love, he said, I shall return to thee, beloved brother. Well shall thou, well shall thou be repaid for this transcendent service. Thou wert the only one through whom this could be done for me. Some day thou shalt see why. And with a happy smile he disappeared on a radiant pathway of light. As the mighty God power within me receded, I was so astonished I fell on my knees and offered the deepest prayer of my life in grateful humility and praised for the privilege of giving such service. I rose and the Master Saint Germain received me in his wondrous embrace. My beloved brother, he said, I am greatly pleased. Noble and faithful was your attendance upon the great God within you. Beautifully did you receive your mighty God in action. I do indeed congratulate you. You will ever be held within our embrace, even though outwardly you may not always be aware of it. You have become a worthy messenger of the great white brotherhood, the ascended host. Hold close to your mighty God self thus. You will ever be ready for service wherever and for whatever is required. My love enfolds you until we meet again. I will keep you informed. Slowly I wended my way back to the lodge. Every step praise and gratitude to the one mighty God that molds us all into the eternal perfection. So tomorrow I'll read Venus Visits the Royal Teton. So in there, do you understand that all of these things are from the universe? I don't care what your gifts or abilities or what you think you're special or magic. That's why in my prayer on Sunday, I ask you to invite these things. And we only borrow whatever. If it's 1,000,000 years we borrow it, when we're done, we return it all to the universe. And understanding how to use all of this in the right way. There's lots and lots of magic.